Okay, recording has started. Welcome everyone to this month's Ask an Expert session. This month's topic is Nios V processors for Intel FPGAs. Next slide. Your expert is going to be Josie Rivera, and I will let you introduce yourself, Josie.
Thanks, Treya. Welcome, everyone. So I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit about me. I joined Intel. I'm based in, and I've joined Intel in May 2022. I'm based in Guadalajara, Mexico. I'm at the Intel Guadalajara Design Center. I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering with biomedical engineering focused from Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara. It's a local university. Currently, I am working as a subject matter expert at the Intel FPGA training group. I teach and develop training on SoC, Intel Nios V processor, and other training courses that we have available for you. Thank you for inviting me today, and I think Shreya is going to be doing the upcoming slide. Thanks, Shreya, also for moderating today.
Yeah, thanks, Josie. Hi everyone, I'm Shreya Mehrotra. I will be your moderator for today's session. If you have questions, there's two ways to ask. You can either unmute yourself and ask verbally, or you can ask via chat. So just enter your question and I will relay it to Josie. A few ground rules that I'd like to cover before we get started. So any question that you can think of about the Nios V processor or related topics is fair game. You can again ask, either unmute yourself or text it in the chat. If it's a detailed this design specific question, we'll try to answer as best as possible. And if we're not able to answer during the time, then we're gonna try to follow up with you afterwards. We want to be able to cover as many questions from as many folks as possible. And finally, we may point you to your local FAE for further assistance. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Josie.
Thanks, Shreya. Feel free to open your mic, everyone who is attending the session, in case you have any questions, or post them in the chat. And please, Shreya, let me know if there are any questions in the chat that I am not aware of at any moment. Thank you. So welcome, everyone, to today's session. Thank you so much for being here and for attending today's Ask an Expert. Well, the objective for today is to provide an overview of the Nios V processor portfolio, ecosystem, and software tools. We also want to cover a little bit about migrating from Nios II to Nios V processor designs as we are approaching end of life, and also obviously to answer any questions on Nios V or Nios II or any other related questions that you might have surrounding everything Nios V processor and its migration from Nios II. So this is a little bit about the agenda for today. We're going to be talking about a little bit of background on the portfolio. Key topics are going to be around Nios Vc, which is our latest addition to the portfolio, a comparison between Nios Vm and Nios Vg processors, comparison to Nios II in some cases, and migration from Nios II to Nios V. Let me move forward with the slides. Okay, so this is our current portfolio. We offer three options for Nios V. As you can see here, we have Nios Vm, which is our first option. We will cover them in detail, each one of these, so you can take a note of the difference in between the architectures and their descriptions. We also have Nios Vg, which is a general purpose processor. It has the highest performance in the portfolio that we offer currently. You will see that the functional units differ from one and into the other, and how you can take this into account when you are migrating from Nios II to Nios V, and what options are available for you to update your your designs. Nios Vc is our latest compact microcontroller. It's as you can see here, it's 32-bit processor too. It doesn't have any debug and control status registers as opposed to other versions of Nios 5, and it's the smallest one available currently. We will cover these in detail so we can take a look at the advantages of each one and how you can make the most out of that migration. I'm going to move forward. So Nios 5M is the first processor in the Nios 5 embedded processor series. It's a 32-bit microcontroller based on RISC-V, which is one of the great changes in the architecture for Nios 5. We have currently two versions, which are pipelined and non-pipelined. We will talk a little bit about the support in each one of the Quartus versions for the pipelined and non-pipelined. It is supported in Quartus Prime Pro and Standard currently, depending on the version too. For Agilex 7 in the case of Prime Pro, Stratix 10, Aria 10, and Cyclone 10 devices. In the case of Prime Standard, in Quartus Prime Standard, we have support for Cyclone, Aria, Stratix, and Max 10 devices. As you can see here, we have several functional units that are part of the architecture. We have the debug module, which is present in Nios 5 M and G. It is a JTAG interface to a software debugger. We have currently support from Ashling IDE as opposed to something that was present in Nios 2. It used to be Eclipse. We will cover also a little bit of that in the upcoming slides. This version of Nios 5 supports bare metal, Intel HAL, and embedded RTOS like Micro C, FreeRTOS, and Zephyr. You can take a look at some examples on rocket boards that we have available also through the design store and in Quartus for you to get started with Nios 5 known examples and tested examples. That can be a great starting point. Some other functional units that we have here inside the processor core, we have the exception controller, the interrupt controller, we have ALU, which is part of all of the versions for Nios 5, and we also have the general purpose register, control status registers, load and store unit, and the timer software interrupt module. Not sure why the order is inverted, but it doesn't really matter. This is our third processor. We will be covering also Nios 5G, the upcoming slide. Nios 5C is the latest addition to our portfolio. It's a 32-bit compact microcontroller based on RISC-V 2. It's RV32i, which is, as you can see, a much smaller processor core. It also has the ALU. It has the program controller and address generation block, as well as general purpose registers and load and store unit. If you notice a little bit of difference with the previous slide, you can see that from the block diagram that some functional units are not present in this version. The initial support for the devices for this version are Agilex, Stratix 10, Aria 10, and Cyclone 10. There's a small area footprint for size optimized controller applications, which is really useful when you are trying to manage any application that is in need of different resources as opposed to probably the applications that are supported by Nios 5G or M. It supports bare metal, Intel HAL, also as part of the options available for this microcontroller. This is the second processor. It's our second processor, as I mentioned. It's different, as you can see here. You find more functional units as opposed to previous two versions that I mentioned. Sorry. It is used to accelerate time-critical software algorithms through the custom instruction logic blocks that are provided, and the custom instructions provide an easy way to experiment with hardware. software trade-offs depending on the application and the design process, because you can easily alter the design on the FPGA-based Nios V processor. As you can see here, it's also a 32-bit general purpose processor. It's based on RISC-V 2. As you can see here, the blocks on green are the difference with Nios V-M, which is a significant increase in capabilities and in applications where you can find those custom instruction logic blocks that are part of the core. It supports it enables more features, as I mentioned, than Nios V-M. It has custom instructions, and data caches, and multiply and divide unit for operations. It has ECC, which is also present in Nios V-M and in Nios Vc. You have a tightly coupled memory and a floating point unit, which is also pretty useful for some of the applications in the general purpose. It also supports bare metal Intel HAL and embedded RTOS like Micro C, FreeRTOS, and Zephyr. It supports Intel Agilex, Stratix, Aria 10, and Cyclone 10. It is currently supported in Quartus Pro, and you will find the version, I think, in the upcoming slides where you can detail the versions for each one of the cores. I just want to make a quick mention on discontinuation notice from Nios II. We have it available in our website. The support for Nios II will become a notice in once you get into Quartus, and once you get into some of the versions that are not supported, you will have a notice that says that the last version supported for Nios II will be 23.4 in the case of Pro and 23.1 in the case of Standard. From version 23.2 and on, we won't offer support for Nios II any longer. So that's why we are ordering this. We have this discontinuation notice in our website, and you can find more information about product discontinuance inside our document for discontinuation notice. While the capabilities in between Nios II and Nios V are different due to architectural changes, we offer a recommendation of the mapping in case you want to migrate or to change to Nios V applications once you start exploring the options for Nios V. So if you have a bare metal non-interrupt driven application and you are using Nios II-E without JTAG debug, RTOS, or interrupts, you can map to Nios Vc, which is supported in Quartus Pro 23.3. If you have a bare metal RTOS with interrupts, you can map from Nios to E or F into Nios V-M non-pipelined, which is supported in Quartus Pro 23.3. In the case of Nios 2F, without cache, custom instruction, and tightly coupled memory and floating point unit, you can migrate to Nios V-M, which is supported in versions Quartus Pro 21.3 and further on, as well as standard 22.1. If you have an application that is using Nios 2F and you want to migrate to Nios V, the recommendation is to migrate to Nios Vg, which is supported in Quartus Pro 23.3. So you have as we mentioned here, you have different applications and migration recommendations, and it's not necessarily the way to go. It depends on your application and what you are trying to do with the architecture. You have to take into account also functionality and how you want to migrate your projects. So a little bit about the block diagrams and the comparison in between the options for Nios Vc and how the Nios II used to work. You have here on the left, you have Nios Vc, which has two blocks, two significant blocks that are ALU and ECC. So in the case of Nios 5M, you also have those two blocks, but you also have added here interrupt controller, exception controller, and a JTAG debug module, which is not present in Nios 5C. You also have the timer here, which is recommended also as a possible migration from Nios 2E into Nios 5C and Nios 5M. So here you have in the Nios 2E, you used to have the ALU and the custom instruction block as part of the architecture too. So you can have a replacement or a substitute or just a comparison for you to understand some of the common blocks and architectural changes suggested for you to migrate to Nios 5. Nios 5M is pretty similar to Nios 2E. You have an additional timer, as I mentioned, and for Nios 5C, it doesn't support interrupt controller, exception controller, and the JTAG debug module. So in the case of Nios 5G, you have on the left most of the blocks being described here present. As you can see here, you have the ALU, you have the multiply divide unit, you have the custom instruction block, and the floating point unit, which is something that sets aside the characteristics of Nios 5G with Nios 5M. This is the most robust version. So if you compare it with Nios 2F, which is the recommendation, not necessarily the replacement, but the recommendation, you can migrate some of the applications into Nios 5G. As you can see here, you have some differences still on branch prediction and on the MMU, but you can consider migrating from Nios 2F into Nios 5G. So a little bit about the tools and ecosystem when migrating from Nios 5 to Nios 2. It used to be, we used to have in the Nios 2 ecosystem and tools, the board support package editor, which was Eclipse-based. It is now inside the functionalities that you can find in Platform Designer, or you can also find it in the command shell from the Nios 5 command shell that it's bundled in the installation for Quartus. You can invoke also from there the BSP editor, or you can use it inside from Platform Designer, which used to be separate in the Eclipse-based environment for Nios 2. The Intel HAL and micro C support is also something that remains in Nios 5. It used to be GNU and GCC toolchain. You also had the BSP settings as an automated scan chain, and the Tickle scripting also bare metal and RTOS debug. Now you find also some of the functionalities that you can invoke in different ways. It is now from Platform Designer, as I mentioned. In Nios 2, it used to be Eclipse IDE. Now you have command line utilities also in Nios 5. It used to be Nios 2. You just change them to Nios 5, and a couple of slight changes in applications and functionalities that you can do from the command shell. You have the Ashlink. Something important to mention that I've heard also from people who have used in the past Nios 2 or are currently using Nios 2 ecosystem and environment tools are that there's a common functionality in the Ashlink risk-free as opposed to what used to be Eclipse-based. They're both pretty similar and pretty easy to use. So Ashlink is a new way to go for debug and for applications and your software project inside also an Eclipse-based environment. It's pretty similar. Ashlink is currently part of the bundled installation, or you can find it as a freestanding software version inside our Quartus download website for Intel FPGAs. And if you have already downloaded Quartus and installed, you can install it freestanding from there too. You find the supported versions for each one of the installation packages. Debug with OS awareness. Yes, in the case of Nios, and it was something that wasn't previously available with Nios II. Ashling, just a quick mention, Ashling is also useful for ARM debug, so you can have everything set up inside one session for or one project inside Ashling. It's pretty useful for everything inside your project combined with debug and on ARM session and also in Nios 5 projects. As I mentioned, one of the main changes in the ecosystem is that the BSP editor used to be isolated and out of Platform Designer is now integrated into the applications there. So a little bit about migration from Nios 2 to Nios 5 projects and application. It used to be something that probably in between versions for Quartus wasn't too much of a um, drastic change, we can say. Currently, you can find that Platform Designer is pretty easy to migrate from Nios 2 to Nios 5. The rest of the flow, you need to be generating each one of the components of the rest of the flow for you to work with the whole project. Since the tool changed, they have the same purpose, they have the same application, and are pretty similar in the case of using, for example, Eclipse and Ashling, just to mention an example. But you do have to go through the rest of the flow for developing the rest of the flow, including the software and part of the hardware project. But they serve the same purpose, and I think that all of the tools are integrated into something that it's pretty intuitive and easy to use. So in the case, for example, for the custom instructions as you go creating a custom component, which is some of the functionality that you can find with the Nios Vg inside Platform Designer, since there are changes in the architecture from RISC to RISC-V, you will find that inside the custom components and some applications for Nios Vg, you will find the differences in the signals and in the adjustments you have to make in your HDL file to create that custom component with to connect your system and the custom instructions and the tools to construct your system inside Platform Designer. There are slight changes there too. But if you're going to migrating from Nios 2 to Nios 5 specifically, you have to take into account performance, architecture, and functional blocks, as we mentioned before, as part of what you need to understand to migrate for the best option in Nios 5. So what about, for example, does my FPGA device support Nios 5 processor? As we mentioned, we have options that are overlapping in the case of Nios 2, and that you can easily take into account when you are migrating to RISC-V or to Nios 5. Some of the devices are listed in the slides that we mentioned before. So does my Quartus software support Nios 5 processor? Is also an important part of the checklist or of the elements that you need to take into account because of the release of each one of the versions in the supported Quartus version of Pro and Standard due to the cadence and the difference in the numbers and the versions for Pro and for Standard. We do have a Nios 5 processor migration guide. I think you will find the steps there useful for you to go migrating from one version to the other depending on your needs. So what do I expect after I migrate from Nios 2 to Nios 5? you have to migrate the hardware component. You have to replace Nios 5 core and platform designer, as I mentioned before. Export the same Nios 2 IP configuration into the Nios 5 core. This means that depending on the version I'm using, I will have different needs to adapt address range, for example. It's pretty similar to the migration connections in the migration, sorry, the connections. Also, for example, if you are selecting inside Quartus, inside Platform Designer, you have the available 3 versions. It used to be Nios 2 that you go into the component and modify from the component. Now you have the list of the supported versions in the IP catalog. So these are also some slight changes when you are trying to configure inside Platform Designer. You have to export signal and interface connections to the new system design. So it's relatively easy to replace and just reconnect everything in your existing designs and just regenerate the rest of the software components and regenerate your BSP project from inside Platform Designer, your app project from the command shell and the ELF file, and use Ashling risk-free, which is pretty similar to Eclipse for the rest of the debug tests and applications. This is an example of how you have the connection for Nios 2 here on the left. As you can see here, you have the processor, and how you just replace in Nios 5 your selection to replace the version you have from Nios 2 to Nios 5. As you can see here, it's pretty similar to how you are used to work in with Nios 2. So you replace the hardware component and you just reconnect accordingly to all of the specified signals and interfaces that you have for Nios 5 application. This is Nios 5M. I see here that they're using custom instructions. Probably Nios 5G will be a suitable replacement. Oh, even though here they're not using it. Well, yeah. Okay. You can find more information in the migration guide. You have an application note there. And you also have a lot of examples inside the, once you open Quartus, you can find examples to open from the design store. You can go directly into our search and take a look at the existing examples there. This is a simplified version of software migration. In the VSP editor, you can begin by exporting the settings and reassigning the exception vector and regenerate your BSP project and files. You can also modify settings and take a look at some of the configurations for HAL and some of the options available inside the BSP editor. Now you have it bundled inside Platform Designer. So for the Nios 2 software or app, part of the application, you used to have a separate, as we mentioned, Eclipse-based also environment. So you can copy the Nios 2 source code to the Nios 5 app folder. You have to follow the folder structure in order to maintain a certain order inside your project to avoid a little bit of confusion once you get to use Ashling. Then you run the Nios 5 app.x, which is also bundled in the Quartus installation as Nios 2 used to be. You run the Nios 5 app and you can run cmake from there. You can also execute a lot of commands from the command shell that are detailed inside the reference manual, where you can find some applications that are pretty useful from the command shell. Or you can go into each one of the steps with Ashling and inside Quartus. And then you run the make.x and you have your application from Nios 5. Okay, so you have the tightly coupled coupled, sorry, instruction memory. It used to be, as you can see here, this used to be the location for um, Nios Nios II-F. We now have it also in Nios Vg. This is an example of also the connections that are available for Nios 5. As it used to be something differently connected in Nios 2F, and Nios Vc must be in wait for interrupt state to release the TCM. This is also detailed inside each one of the descriptions for the different versions of Nios 5 M and G inside the reference manual. You can take a look at it more in detail. I just want to quickly mention before we move on into the questions and a little bit of suggestions of some resources available for you to go through. I just want to mention some of the advantages of using and migrating to Nios 5. It is a RISC-V architecture, ISA, and one of the advantages of using RISC-V is that there's a growing open community and huge ecosystem for support and development. And we currently have in use a lot of tools that are also part of that environment and that are growing as the ecosystem is being widely adopted. So migrating to RISC-V is an advantage because of all of the existing resources and support that come with the use of the architecture. We have a wide range of operating systems, as mentioned, that are supported for Nios 5 processors, which are Zephyr, FreeRTOS, and Micro-C. You can find a tutorial for using Nios 5 and Zephyr inside our RocketBoard's website. That you can find some of the examples also there for use of Nios 5. It used to be Linux dependent. Now you don't have any need to install WSL because it is supported with native tools currently, as opposed to the dependency we used to have with Nios 2. And as we mentioned, Ashling is also a great tool which now supports debug and software built for Nios 5 and HPS components as it is bundled with Quartus Prime. And the installation is free of cost as part of what we offer in our download site. Just a quick mention to design examples. We have them available inside our design store. And also, as I mentioned, inside RocketBoards. There is a separate no-cost license for each core available. You can find it inside the self-service licensing center, where you can go in and download each license for each one of the versions, so you can compile your designs inside Platform Designer, and the projects you generate inside. You can compile your projects inside your Quartus version. And resources available also, user guides, the migration guide that I mentioned before, a lot of how-to videos to install and get started with your designs with Nios 5. You can take a look also at the design store, where we have Hello World examples and a lot of examples for booting and custom instructions, and a lot of examples that you will find useful with the existing course, as well as we offer training for Nios 5 through our workshop in the training team, and a lot of quick videos for you to install and get started with your migration and your design. Shreya, I think we can move on to the Q&A.
Okay, so folks on the call, are there any questions you have? You can unmute yourself or you can put them in the chat. And if there are no questions at this point, then I think we can cover the ones that were sent before the session. So I have one, which is, how is the licensing for the Nios 5 soft processor different from the Nios 2 licensing?
Well, you have to go and into the self-licensing center. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shreya. Um, and you have to install that particular license for the core. I'm not sure if the question is if you can use the previous one in the newest versions, but you have to go and specifically install each one of the licenses for the core you are using
Yeah,
for you to
uh,
compile. Yeah.
just to add to that, so it's available under the free or evaluation licenses tab on the self-service licensing center. So it's free of cost. You just need to sign up for the license to be able to use it in the Quartus tools. Um,
The Nios 2 version used to be the same, Shreya?
the Nios II does require a license, and it's a paid license. It comes for $495.
Okay,
So that's the difference. We don't, it's free license for Nios 5.
for 3 versions. Okay.
Okay, the next question is Nios 5 only available for Quartus Pro version or for all Quartus versions?
We do have support for standard in Nios 5M, and I believe it's changing constantly. So if you are waiting for a release, probably that will be compatible with other versions for Nios 5G. It's something that it's upcoming. Currently, we have Nios 5M supported in standard 22.1.
Yeah, and the future cores, the G and the C that are already available in 23.3 Pro, those will be available in the next standard release.
Hmm. Yes.
Then the next question is there a low-cost evaluation board that you're aware of suitable for Nios 5?
We do have support for Cyclone and Max. I don't know if that is considered low cost. And upcoming also we have support for upcoming Agilex. I think upcoming versions. I'm not sure, but I do believe that if, for example, you are using standard with one device there, you can migrate to 5M to Nios 5M.
And Nios 5 is device agnostic, and the M version is supported and on all the devices across standard and pro. So any of the Max 10, the DE10 Nano or Lite, any of those, um, you could use Nios 5M on those
Hmm.
today, and then wait till the end of the year to be able to evaluate G and C on those.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answered your question, Anthony. Okay.
Okay. See.
Are there any more questions in the chat? Okay, we can go back to the ones on the list here. When is the last time buy for the Nios 2 soft processor IP?
Um, I think I mentioned that. Let me go back just to make sure that I give the correct version. I had a slide for the discontinuation notice just to give you the exact um, Quartos version that is going to be supported. It's 23.4 for Pro and 23.1 are the last versions that are going to be supporting Nios 2. So it's
And to add, the last time buy would be March of 2024, which is just the month before the next release of Quartus version 24.1. So any
yes.
orders that need to be placed for Nios 2F have to be placed before March, last week of March 2024, for both the Pro and the standard releases of Quartus.
Mhm. Yes. Thank you, Shreya.
Then the next question is, how easy is it to install and use the Nios 5 processor development tools? on Windows development hosts compared to the Nios II processor development tools?
In the case of Nios V, it's pretty easy. You go install Quartus and you have bundled their Ashling. So really, you have you set up everything pretty quickly. If you are, for example, using Eclipse-based because you are comfortable with Eclipse IDE, you can also use those tools. We have a quick video. It's pretty easy to set up too. I think that that is also one of the advantages of Nios 5, that you have everything bundled and easier to install and use. In Windows, you are no longer WSL dependent, and it's you have everything set up for your install pretty quickly through Ashling and Quartus. So once you do that, you can download easily also an example design, or open an example project in Quartus, and you are all set up. In Nios 2, I think you had some dependencies on Linux, and you also had to set up some environment tools, which probably if you're more experienced, it's not too hard. But I think it's pretty simple also to use Nios 5 tools as compared to what we had in Nios 2.
Right, and also for Nios 2, we didn't have the option to be able to install the Nios 2 EDS separately. It was a part of the Quartus installer. But for
Hmm.
the risk-free, we also have the standalone version for people who do not wish to download the full Quartus installer. So you can just
Yeah.
download the risk-free IDE and the programmer separately.
Yes, and if you have already, for example, installed Quartus and you just became aware that you need Ashling, you can also just install it according to your version, and that's it. Yeah.
Okay, next question is, what are the differences in custom instructions from Nios 2 to Nios 5 processors?
You do have a difference in the custom components when you are creating, when you go through the steps for creating in Quartus. Um, you have to add a couple of signals that are different. For example, I think it used to be data zero, just to mention an example on one of the signals that you have there. It used to be data zero or something like this in Nios 2, and now it's called data A and data B. So you do have slight differences. You can take a look at our guide and custom instructions to the specific signals that you need to have present there because of the changes in the architecture to RISC-V. So you have to have a couple of signals there adjusted to add to the custom component. And if you just import, let's say, the HDL file that you used to have in Nios 2, it won't work because the signals are different. So the list of the signals you can find in the custom instructions guide we have for Nios 5G. Yeah, there are some slight differences.
And one of the notable differences is also that for Nios 2F, we actually had the floating point hardware as a custom instruction. But for Nios 5, we have an internal dedicated floating point unit. And so that the floating point hardware custom instruction, that's not compatible with the RISC-V compiler, and you would need to use the FPU in the Nios 5 for that.
Yes, you are right.
And then there's one more question, which is, what is the difference between Nios 5 ECC versus Nios 2 ECC?
Um, I I'm not quite sure. I don't know if you have any input on this, Shreya. Yeah.
Yeah, I can take that one. So right now we're calling that ECC Lite, which is available as of 23.3 on the M and the G cores and the
Mm-hmm.
C. And so basically what that means is that it only flags and halts on uncorrectable errors in the register file. And the full
Mm-hmm.
support, which is the equivalent of Nios 2F, that's not available yet, but that will be in a future version of Quartus. But that's basically for correctable errors, where an error correction is performed uh, for the register file, caches, TCMs, and also the on-chip memory. And then for the
Mhm.
uncorrectable errors, there's a software exception handler for
Yeah.
users where appropriate.
Mhm. Yeah. Thanks, Shreya. Any other question?
Uh, yes, there's one more that just came up. What is so Luke is a computer engineering student, and is wondering what would be a good way to thoroughly learn about and practice using Nios 5.
Um, Hi, Luke. Well, it would be great if you could take our training. I invite you to take our workshop. We do hands-on lab. And if you have some type of conflict or whatever, you want to learn on your own, you can go through our examples in the design store. It's a really cool way to get started. In our landing page, we also have available resources for you to go through the examples. We also have e-learnings in our training website and instructor-led training, as I mentioned, in our workshops. If you want to install all of the tools and go through, let's say, an example or a step-by-step example, we have an embedded manual where you can find a step-by-step follow through the designs that we have available in our design store. Yeah. Anything else you want to add, Treya?
No, I think that's pretty much it. And we do have the Nios 5 webpage, which also has how-to videos, links to all the documentation that we have on Nios 5. So maybe you can even get started there, other besides the training.
Yeah, and I think they're pretty awesome videos that you can find there and get started and start experimenting a little bit, playing around with Nios 5. I posted in the chat, Shreya,
Yeah.
the link to the feedback survey. We welcome your feedback. We want to hear more from you, and we welcome your comments and any feedback you have is pretty valuable for us. Okay, so let me move on to the last part of the presentation. If you want to learn more, as I mentioned, you can go to the resources design examples presented, and you can
So
scan the code. Yes,
that's the code to the webpage that I mentioned, the Nios 5 webpage. So if you go there, you'll find resources.
videos, tutorials, examples. Yeah, it's pretty complete. Um, and also some of the resources mentioned here, like the migration guide, the custom instruction guide, you can find them there too. Okay. Um,
Yeah, so that brings us to the end of our session. The survey link is posted in the chat, as Josie mentioned. And also, if you want to scan the QR code instead, it's available here on this slide. Please take a moment to fill out the survey. We would really appreciate your feedback. And yeah, that's the end of our session. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And the recording
Thank you
will
so
end
much.
shortly.
Thank you so much for attending. Thanks, Rhea, for the session today, and everyone. Hope to see you soon.